Okay, this August 5th, 2025 meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now called to order. Ms. Ono, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck.
Here.
Councilors Verdict.
Here.
Corrigan.
Here.
Councilor Raff is excused. Afghan.
Here.
Maboop is excused. Councilor Windland.
Here. Unexcused.
No excuses.
No excuse.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We're going to start the meeting by moving into executive session. Ms. Osnak, will you please review the guidelines for executive session for us?
Thank you, Mayor Buck. Members of council, you will now meet in executive session for the purpose of considering information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection, and also to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of the Lake Oswego public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to record the proceedings or report on any of the deliberations during executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session, and at the end of the executive session, we will return and to open session and reopen. Is that correct, Mayor?
Yes,
Thank you.
that is correct. Okay, we plan to return to open session around 3 p.m., and we are going to recess and we'll reconvene in the side room. All right, we are back in order in open session, and I'd like to invite everyone to stand and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Okay, this is the time set on our agenda for public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to provide public comment? Do you want to provide public comment? Okay. You're fine. Take your time, Dan. That's okay. Come on up. Take your time. You know the drill. Yeah, introduce yourself, even though we know you. Let everyone else know who you are.
Well, my name is Diane Cassidy. I live at 3601 Wren Street in Lake Oswego. 50-year resident of Lake Oswego, and my husband grew up here, so this is home. And I'm only here because I love Lake Oswego, and I've been happy to live here, except that my happiness quotient has gone way down in the last couple of years, and a lot of the problem comes from right here in this room, and I need to talk about it. And luckily, it coincides with some of the things that you're going to be dealing with. I thought it was on the agenda today, the affirmatively furthering fair housing, but you have on your agenda to look at the comprehensive plan and put a fair housing policy in or amend it. This is an area of expertise for me. I have for the last 25 years been an apartment owner of up to 9 properties at one time, part owner of those, not that, but I sold my last one in 2023. The state became too oppressive. The rules, I can't work as an employee of the state, basically, as a private business person doing business in rental housing. So I sold. But that's a whole nother story. But I thought I knew everything there was to know about rental housing industry until I started reading about, and about low-income housing. My father was a builder, and he was on the Housing Authority of Portland back in the 60s. It was always a passion of his to make sure that people were housed, and his stock and trade was building starter homes. He was the biggest builder in the state by volume in his time, and a lot of that was starter homes. My first home was one of those, and I got in with sweat equity. He didn't give me the money, but I had to work for it. My expertise, let's see, I started reading about El Nido, the project scheduled for Lake Grove. I thought, oh, I would like to hear about this. And I was shocked. My head started to spin when I read that it was, the advertising online said it was for families and people of color. And I thought, well, surely they made a mistake. That's discrimination. If I tried to advertise anything or stated that my housing was for people of color, or fill in the blank, for anybody in particular, for families, for just older people, and not having it designated, 55 and older property, but if I said, we just want retired folk because they're quiet, I would be subject to severe penalties and possibly criminal prosecution. That would be discriminatory, and I know it. So when I saw that, I thought, this can't be right. This is wrong. You cannot have preferences when it comes to housing. You cannot state them, you can't have them. So how can this be? So I called up all of agencies involved in that.
I'm so sorry, your time has expired, but we
Oh, it
appreciate
can't be.
you
It can't
being here.
be. What I want to say, I've got to
And we
finish.
got your packet.
You got the packet. The affirmatively furthering fair housing law rule has changed. As of April of this year, it has reverted back to its 1994 meaning, which is nothing more or less than the Fair Housing Act itself, which is non-discrimination.
Thank you,
You
Diane.
cannot
Diane,
use
I'm so
disparate
sorry.
impact
We got to
or...
move on. I'm very sorry. We're on a tight timeline tonight. I know. Thank you, Diane. Thank you. We got your information. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry to have to cut you off. I know. I'm sorry to, no, thank you, Diane. Thank you, Diane. We just can't, we can continue talking later. We just can't do it right now. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to provide public comment? Okay. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. We have 2 items on the consent agenda, the 2025 council goals second quarter update and draft meeting minutes from June 3rd and July 14th. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
The consent agenda?
All right, the motion's been made by Councilor Corrigan and seconded by Councilor Afghan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. Okay, now on to council business. Item 8.1, we have the consideration of Resolution 25-37. This is a continued item. It's authorizing the execution and delivery of the WIFIA loan with the EPA for the wastewater treatment plant facility in an amount not to exceed $123,480,000. And we have Director Cross, Special Projects Manager, Director, Special Director, too? Yeah, okay, good. Mr. Broadus, good to have you both here.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you, Mayor Buck and councilors. My name is Stefan Broadus. I am the Director of Special Projects. Joined with me up here today is the Finance Director, Sean Cross. And as previously mentioned, this is a continuation from an item that we brought in late July. And we wanted to talk about the project funding plan for the upcoming wastewater treatment facility, specifically the WIFIA loan agreement. So on the agenda today, I'd like to talk about 4 main things. One, I'd like to give an overview of the project funding portfolio and the sources in which we're going to pay for this project. Then I'd like to give a quick timeline of the project, specifically in regards to this WIFIA loan. So we'll look back in time at the history of this project and how the selection of the WIFIA loan came to be. But then we'll also look forward as far as what the next steps in this process are. Third, I want to talk a little bit about why WIFIA, so why we decided and elected to pursue this loan and why it's in the best interest of the city. And then I want to talk about next steps for the project looking ahead over the next 24 months or so. The project funding plan consists of several sources. So up here on the screen, you'll see them in no particular order. First, we have utility revenues. We also have cost share payments from the city of Portland. So those are much in the format of our payments that we make to the city of Portland today and have made for many years. And so that arrangement would just be reversed. We also have up here on the screen system development charges. So this is money paid into that fund from private development projects. It's not a huge percent of the overall funding plan, but every bit helps. We also show a couple sources of debt that we intend to take on to fund this project, the first of which is municipal bonds. So we took out bonds last year in order to fund the property acquisition component of the project. And then we will intend to take out bonds at some point over the next year or two in order to supplement the WIFIA loan to pay for the capital construction component of the project. And then finally, you see up there the federal government's Environmental Protection Agency Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, otherwise affectionately known as the WIFIA loan. As far as a brief history of this project and WIFIA, it dates back to late 2021. The project was selected by the EPA to apply, so we did. And then in February, a few months later, the City Council approved that application. Somewhat of an important note here is that at the time, we were in a partnership with EWFP, otherwise known as EPCOR, and at that time, EPCOR was going to be the loan holder, and that was going to be a part of their overall proposal on how to finance the project. Fast forward to September of 2022, staff came to City Council to give an update on the project. There is a note in there that came to be quite important as events played out, was that if in the event that the project agreement was not executed with WIFIA, the rights to that application approval from the EPA would be retained by the city. So those rights would go to the city and not to EPCOR. Going forward to April of 2023, we had another update to council in which we started talking about the WIFIA loan and transferring it from EPCOR being the loan holder to the city being the loan holder, all under the intent of making the project more financially viable. And we made reference specifically to this affordability threshold, also known as affordability cap. And I will go into a little bit more details there on that affordability threshold a little bit later in this presentation. Next item up here was January of 2024. If you remember, we then formally decided not to proceed the project with our partner EPCOR at the time. And then right at the end of last year, we submitted the WIFIA loan application, but this time as the city as the loan holder. Continuing up on this timeline, in June, the loan agreement draft was sent to us from EPA, and we have since been coordinating that draft with staff with EPA as well as our council to help us with those terms and conditions. Today, we're here seeking the authorization from council to execute that loan agreement. If authorized, we would then later this month execute the loan agreement with EPA. And the date right now is August 26th, subject to change, but that's where our date is right now. And then that last bullet point up there is looking forward to summer of next year, and it says here, WIFIA loan draws begin. And that's a really critical item to note here, in that this, what we're seeking your authorization here today is not to begin withdrawing these monies, is not to commit to the entirety of this amount. What we're seeking authorization today is just to execute the loan agreement. And that's when we were here in July, Director Cross mentioned, perhaps it's better to think of this as a line of credit, in that what we're seeking to get is the ability to draw from this loan and draw the funds when we need them. Okay, next up is why WIFIA. And the first one I have up here in bold, because I think it's probably the most important one, is this deferred payment for rate stability. And that has been a major success criteria for this project and remains today. So I've bolded that one, and I want to get into a little bit of the specifics there, so I'll run through a quick actual exercise there of what that looks like here in a second. But some of the other advantages of WIFIA are also quite significant and worth mentioning. So there is no prepayment or refinancing penalties, and so that really just goes right along with this overall message that we're doing this for the sake of financial flexibility on the project. That is the name of the game here. Another benefit is draw timing, interest accrual flexibility. Like I mentioned before, authorizing this loan agreement does not commit to the debt in full or in part. We can pull from this loan when we need to. And as far as interest accrual goes, we have the option to not begin principal payments for up to 5 years after substantial completion, which is probably going to be 2 to 3 years after we execute this loan agreement. So what that does is it really helps us defer our debt service payments so that we can maintain a low increase in utility rates as opposed to an abrupt and large utility rate increase. And again, I'll get into the details of that in a second. And also worth noting is federal permitting assistance. So this is an element of the project that can be cumbersome, unpredictable, difficult, and by having the WIFIA loan, we then have a liaison working with us that works for the Environmental Protection Agency, and they help us coordinate all of these permittings, such as environmental, archaeological, and really help shepherd that process through. And we are quite a ways through that process right now, and I can say it has been an enormous help having them as a liaison there. So I want to take a moment to dive a little bit deeper into the deferred payments for rate stability. Right now, well, let me go back a second. Our affordability threshold, affordability cap that we've talked about on this project to date has been a maximum of 3.9% annual sewer utility rate increase. And with our median monthly sewer bill at $89.72 right now, and that's from our master rates and fees booklet, that rate increase of 3.9% translates to about $3.50 a month. That compared to analysis that we've performed, if we do not obtain this WIFIA loan and we fund the capital construction component of this project with just municipal bonds and the other sources that I've mentioned, it requires a significant increase immediately in order to start raising capital to pay that debt service off that would begin immediately once we drew the money. And so what that would look like based on our current construction estimates is instead of a 3.9% annual utility rate increase, more like a 35% utility rate increase, which is on the median monthly bill, $31.40 approximately. So that's kind of the takeaway here is the WIFIA loan, it gives us the flexibility. It's very true there's a model out there where we fund this with purely municipal bonds and we pay less interest in that way. In the council report packet, you saw some numbers there. But the big picture of this story is that the WIFIA gives us that flexibility to keep the rates down, keep them uniform, and help us meet that affordability threshold that has been so important to this project for so long. So looking ahead to the next steps of the project, we issued the request for proposals last week, which was a major milestone for us. We look to execute this WIFIA loan agreement later this month. We would then get the proposal back with a fixed price proposal back later this year, likely towards the end. And after some analysis and negotiation, we would then bring that back to this council for approval and execution of that contract. So that would be sometime next spring. We would look to pull demolition, site grading, other early work permits shortly after that, and therefore we would start, our intent would be to start pulling on that WIFIA loan at that point to start making those payments. We would then, at some point in 2027, we would sell the additional municipal bonds that I mentioned earlier that would need to supplement the WIFIA loan in order to pay for the capital construction. And that sequencing is intentional due to the deferment of the principal payments on the WIFIA loan that I mentioned earlier. It makes sense to draw that WIFIA loan first, pull the bonds as late as we can. And then late 2028, our construction would be complete. We would commission the new plant. We would decommission the existing plant. That would also start the timer on our 5-year deferment window for the WIFIA payments, and we would be off and running with operation of the new plant. So That's a presentation for the WIFIA loan and reasons why we feel like it's in the city's best interest to continue to pursue this. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Okay, thank you, Director. Colleagues, questions? Councilor Corrigan?
Make sure I understand. When you draw the money, when you start taking the draws, it'll be at 1% over the 30-year Treasury rate? Is that what I understood?
And roughly whatever we pull out is probably going to be a 35-year loan.
35.
And so it'll be whatever the rate is that day at 35. We have one chance, or we get one, attempt, or I should say, we get one time that we can, if rates go down, we can apply before we start drawing. Once we start drawing, the rate is what it is, but we can say rates go down 50 basis points over the next 9 months, and say we get a 5% loan, but and then it goes down to 4.5. We can apply before we start drawing and getting a 4.5, and then that's what we get for 35 years.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Afghan?
If the project, this is a hypothetical question, I'm not implying anything. If the project is late, does that impact how this contract is going to be affected?
No, the repayment schedule is based on the date of substantial completion.
Okay.
And so that would defer with that if it were to be late. We will have contract provisions in there to discourage and also penalize late construction on top of that as a motivation and incentive to stay on schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this WIFIA loan approach, as we've said from the get-go, is really wise. I mean, the sewer rates, critical infrastructure, and it's expensive to run all this infrastructure and to maintain. Obviously, if we could pay for everything up front and avoid any interest, well, that's always the first choice, but that's often unrealistic, in even in our own daily lives. And so spreading this out over a period of time will help us to accomplish our goals in having cleaner and sustainable infrastructure that will serve the community for generation to come, and in a way that's the most affordable for everyone in the community. So seems good. Okay. Would someone like to make a motion adopting this? Yeah, please, Councilwoman.
I'd like to move to adopt Resolution 25-37, authorizing the execution and delivery of the WIFIA loan with the EPA for the wastewater treatment facility project in the amount not to exceed $123,480,000.
Second.
Right, motion has been made by Councilor Wendland and seconded by Councilor Burdick. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Okay, we're now moving into our public hearings. First item is item 9.1. It's Ordinance 2966. This is consideration of our 20 is Plenty speed reduction program. We have Director Rooney, Carlin. Good afternoon to you both. Good to have you here. Well,
Afternoon.
Sorry, I forgot. I lost my script. We're going to start. Before you start, Ms. Osnak will talk to us about the hearing procedures.
That's right, Karen.
Very briefly, Mayor Buck, members of the council, now at the time set for a public hearing on Ordinance 2966. This is a legislative decision, which is a policy decision within your discretion. We're going to begin with a presentation by our director and city engineer. Testimony will then be received from the public, subject to the time limits in the agenda. Time limits shall not include time taken by questions from the council or responses to such questions. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. I'll ask now, as I always do, if there are any financial conflicts of interest, reminding you that ex-parte contacts and site visits do not need to be declared. And I'll pause briefly, and you should raise your hand or otherwise indicate if you have a financial conflict of interest. Seeing none, we're ready for the staff report.
Okay, and if anyone would like to testify as part of this hearing, there's blue slips in the back, and go ahead and fill one out and hand it to Ms. Ono up here, but yeah, Director and Mr. Farley.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Councilors. Erica Rooney, Public Works Director and City Engineer, and with me is the Assistant City Engineer and Traffic Engineer, Will Farley. We're here, again, as a continuation from conversations that we had back in April, a study session, which was which was about implementing a program often referred to as 20 is Plenty. And with the direction that we received from you all back in April, we're here to provide some more context, some more detail on some of the questions that you had, and then have a proposed ordinance for moving this program forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Farley, who's going to address a lot of those questions that we had hanging last time. So go ahead, Will.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councilors. I'm Will Farley, the Assistant City Engineer and occasional traffic engineer, and I'm here to bring forth Ordinance 2966, allowing the city to enact a 20 is Plenty program. I know that many of us have places to be this afternoon, so I'll be prompt as I usually am. To give a quick refresher, speed limits are set one of two ways: state statute based on the type of road, or speed zone orders, which involve the Oregon Department of Transportation approving an engineering study to determine the appropriate speed of that roadway. I often get asked why ODOT has authority over speeds on all roadways in the state, and the reasoning I've heard in the past is to keep consistency and to prevent actions that create speed traps. They're really close on having administrative rules and laws to make sure that they get the delegation of the speed limits. So we are looking to lower the residential statutory speed limit by 5 miles per hour to give us a 20 mile per hour speed limit in many areas of the city. Consistent with the ORS that came from Senate Bill 558 in 2019. ORS 810-180-11 allows us to lower the statutory speed limit on streets within residence districts so long as they are not on an arterial highway and we post the appropriate speed limit. Just because this will play into the discussion later, I wanted to show Council ORS 810-180-10, which is the law that the Clackamas County and other road authorities need to use when considering reducing the speed limit on one of their streets. This one specifically, I wanted to highlight that the road authority can only override the statutory speed if the road carries less than 2,000 cars per day with a 85th percentile speed of less than 30 miles an hour. These criteria were put in to help counties implement the program on roads that were indeed local streets or operating as local streets, and to maintain public trust and compliance with the program by not lowering the speeds on roadways where people were naturally driving faster. So with that background out of the way, we ended our April 15th meeting with the request to come back with an ordinance, which I've provided here with Ordinance 2966, that allows us to start rolling out a 20 is Plenty program. Guidance at that time was to not only lower the speed on local roadways, but to also consider neighborhood collectors as well. Also, we wanted to come back and give you kind of an implementation strategy along with a rough estimate for a timeline to get these speed limits reduced on our streets. So when we talk about local roadways and neighborhood collectors, we are referencing their functional classification identified in our city's transportation system plan. We have approximately 190 miles of roads under our jurisdiction, 135 miles of which are classified as local streets, shown here in green. These roads have the primary function of providing access to residences and ideally should see very little through traffic. Basically, everyone on that road should be going or coming from somewhere nearby. Then we also have 20 miles, or approximately 20 miles, of neighborhood collector streets. These 36 roadways, or approximately 36 roadways, are intended to collect traffic from a neighborhood area to direct towards our major collector and arterial system. While they often provide access to homes along the street, unlike local level roadways, they are intended to carry more through traffic and have a higher design speed. So during our April 15th meeting, Council expressed an interest in being consistent with other nearby jurisdictions and wanted us to include neighborhood collectors when considering the lower speed limit. Tigard's 20 is Plenty program looked to reduce speed limits on local streets in residence districts, but when diving into their details further, they also did reduce the speed limit on some of their neighborhood collectors as well, the ones that operated as local streets. They ultimately gave the city engineer the authority to review and approve eligible locations. Clackamas County has adopted their Walk by Clackamas plan that will reduce the speed limit on shared streets or identified shared streets that meet the listed criteria. Since they are a road authority and not a city, they will have to abide by the average volume and 85th percentile speed criteria in ORS 810-180-10. which is the 2,000 vehicles a day and less than 30 miles per hour for an 85th percentile speed. In reviewing the material from the Walk Bike Clackamas Plan, I came across that Oregon City had a 20 is Plenty program as well for streets that they identified as family-friendly routes. These were 33 identified streets in the transportation system plan, their transportation system plan, that connected shared use paths, parks, and schools. However, they also used the 2,000 ADT and 30 mile per hour 85th percentile speed to govern which roads they can put that 20 mile per hour speed limit on. So when looking into how we could implement the program and reviewing the data from our neighborhood collectors, it was observed that traffic volumes and travel speeds vary significantly depending on the roadway, likely based on its current design. I've kind of shown the data from a select few of them here. Kind of calling attention to some of it, Goodall Road, very much a rural roadway that is similar to some roads you may see further out in the county with higher speed limits, has a really high 85th percentile speed, and it is signed 25 now. Waluga Drive is a street that connects many of the streets in the Lake Forest and Waluga neighborhoods to Carmen Drive, itself feeding Interstate 5 and Cruz Way. While this street has shoulders, its rural character has been preserved by land use decisions and policy over the years. This one has high volume, but more reasonable 85th percentile speed. Westview Drive, another road that has maintained its rural character, and Green Tree Road, a nearby one that actually has more modern infrastructure such as curbs and sidewalks, feed traffic from Palisades and Westridge neighborhoods to South Shore Road. Though you can see kind of a difference in those in the traffic and the speeds that they carry. So as you see, implementation may not be as straightforward as consistent on some of these roadways. So after reviewing the data for our 36 neighborhood collector roadways, collected as far back as 2008, staff had concerns about implementing a lower speed limit on some of these streets. On streets with a higher 85th percentile speed, there was a concern we'd have a greater variation in speed, with some of the drivers driving closer to that 20 mile per hour limit, while others driving the feel or the design of the roadway, usually significantly faster than the speed limit. Having a greater variation in speeds between users is often linked to an increased frequency and severity of crashes. Also, on streets where the 85th percentile speed is higher, there was a concern that we could be intentionally setting a speed trap. For those that drive the way the road is designed, there is a concern that we'll be setting them up to naturally break the speed limit, and they would likely suffer a stiffer penalty from doing so. And then on streets where the volumes are higher, we had a concern of enforceability. Instead of getting calls about hundreds of drivers exceeding a 25 mile per hour speed limit by 3 to 5 miles an hour, the police department will now get calls of thousands of drivers exceeding the 20 mile speed limit by 8 to 10 miles an hour. With this in mind, we came up with a policy starting point on which neighborhood collectors should be signed 20 miles per hour, mostly in line with that Clackamas County is required to follow. The roadway needs to be in a residence district. That would be regardless of which criteria we follow. The average volume needs to be less than 2,000 vehicles a day, so it is indeed operating like a local residential street. That the 85th percentile speed is less than 30 miles an hour, so we aren't entrapping people driving the design of that street. The roadway must be under the city's jurisdiction for the length of that speed limit, so we don't have it going between county and city, going 20, 25, 20, 20, 25, and bouncing back and forth. And we want to try to keep the speed limit consistent along the length of the roadway as best as we can. I'm thinking like Lakeview Boulevard, which has a segment that is a major collector that we can't touch. So having it all 25 will make sure people are staying consistent. So following this policy resulted in the map shown here with the green roads getting the lower speed limit of 20 miles per hour and the red ones remaining at 25. Again, this is our starting point, and we continue to monitor and reevaluate as needed when new infrastructure is installed. Having this visual, you can kind of see like segments like Washington Court, which is this little segment here, Oak Ridge and Furwood, they're going to be consistent with the segments that actually go into the county. We can't change the stuff west of where it's red because those are still roads under county jurisdiction. Lakeview Boulevard, I mentioned, would be consistent with that little segment between South Shore and Bryant that we can't change the speed limit on. But this policy also helps us in really confusing areas such as Wren, Cedar, and Cardinal Drive, which you can see jogs right here between South Shore and Bryant, or Laurel, Hallinan, and Cherry, which jogs between Cornell and State Street. This will help it just be consistent, and everyone should be driving 20 in those areas, including in the local streets. Also, Westview, Hallinan, and Upper Drive have significant portions of which are that are local. So Upper Drive over this segment west of Bryant is local, so it'll be consistent all the way through. Hallinan, I had mentioned, also has segments. And let's see, Westview has the segment down south that is also local streets. So it keeps consistency. So now, after the Ordinance 2966 is enacted, we would begin implementation of our program throughout the city. First phase of this program will be go through each area of the city and replace the existing 25-mile-per-hour sign with a new 20-mile-per-hour sign. The speed limit should be official on many of these roads once these signs are replaced. It would be expected to take about up to 6 months to procure the signs and get staff out to replace the 135 signs identified in the last meeting. The second phase would be to sign each neighborhood as needed to ensure the new speed limit is posted appropriately. Since this requires a bit more effort in identifying proper locations and utility locates, we'd expect this to take up to 12 months to install the approximately 230 signs with new posts. And then education outreach for our 20 is Plenty program will start this fall and include all of the already excellent platforms we typically do, a web page, posts on social media, and articles on our city newsletters such as LO Down or Hello LO. These outreach efforts will continue throughout the implementation of this program. And with that, I open it to questions and ask council to enact Ordinance 2966 to get us started.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Farley. Well, before we have the public hearing, does anyone have any questions? I had just a couple questions. That segment of Lakeview, what is that segment between South Shore and Bryant there? How is it classified?
It is a major collector in our transportation system plan. It carries well over 5,000 cars a day and is basically the continuation of Bryant to get onto South Shore.
Gosh, yeah. That's a tricky one. It's like the worst part of Lakeview, honestly. Okay, well, another solution for that part of roadway. So I just want to be, just to clarify, so the kind of policy framework criteria that you've set forth follows basically what the state has set for the counties to follow, but the state had given cities this kind of broader permission to just by statute change the speed limits on these classifications of roadways by the 5 miles per hour with no study, traffic study, is that correct?
Correct.
Or
It allows local or allows cities to reduce it as long as it's in a residence district, is not arterial. They gave cities a little bit more leeway, understanding that counties have rural roads that may look like residence districts, but in talking with a county engineer, he said they didn't want to have 55 basic rural streets signed down to 20 miles an hour and cause issues with compliance elsewhere.
Yeah, they make them do some more work.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Councilor Afkin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. The county requirement, do we have to comply with that?
It probably takes someone that plays lawyer a lot better than I do, but I believe that since there are two different ORSs, it's identified as an or statement. So a road authority has to follow those criteria, or a city has to follow a different criteria. That we don't have to follow both, just one or the other.
So if we wanted to be consistent and said everything is 20, are we going to have an issue with the county?
Probably, well, the county would have to go in and sign their roads to be consistent with us, and it will cause a lot of small segment of Washington Court, 20 miles an hour, and then 25, and then, oh, we have this segment of Washington Court that would need to be signed 20, and it would cause variation and a lot of confusion to drivers.
Okay, thank you. The concerns that you listed this time, are they any different than the last time?
Last time I was wanting to avoid neighborhood collectors altogether because it was opening a new can of worms, so to say. But in reviewing it further, some of these do make sense to become lower speeds. The segment on Wren, Cedar, and what was the other one? Cardinal. The way that one jogs through as a route for a neighborhood collector, that would be a headache to sign 25 and have 20 going elsewhere and not be confusing to a driver. Same thing with Hallinan and Laurel. There is a big segment of Laurel that's local, however, a big segment that's neighborhood collector. It makes total sense to sign all those 20 miles an hour, just to be consistent and not confusing and hopefully get the best compliance with this program.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have any more questions, but when we deliberate, then we can talk.
Thanks, Councilor Afghan. Okay, why don't we go ahead, we're going to open the public hearing. And I have two folks who have signed up for the public hearing. Again, if anyone else would like to testify on this, please just fill out one of the blue forms in the back. But Ms. Cassidy, are you still here? Did she leave? Oh, okay, well, now we're down to one. And it is you, Charlotte Williams. Please, Ms. Williams, come forward. Have a seat.
Use the whole time?
No, not at all. Not
I
at all.
use as little
We
as
have
my-
a whole
I
5
can.
minutes, a lot of time. Please just be comfortable and introduce yourself.
I'm Charlotte McWilliams. I'm a citizen here. Do I have to say my
No.
address? Okay. And I'm here to, I guess, urge. Seeing this and plans like this concern me slightly, because while they're experts and they're engineers and it's their job, they're very qualified to decide what speed limits are. I mean, that's like a thing they can do with success. There's a reason we do those sort of studies and decide speed limits versus based on like a lot of collected data. I urge you to check the results of programs like this, because as someone who wants the cars to go slower, I know for a fact that the speed that it says on the sign is not always the speed that people go. And I know there are places where if we made the speed limit like really low, people would go, oh, I'm not even gonna look at it. And even if the goal is make everyone go as slow as possible, I don't know if necessarily reducing the speed limit in these places, like programs that have this, like this has done, is the best scenario. And it would be interesting. They mentioned that something similar to this has happened in Oregon City. I am urging you to look at that. That's all. I want to see, sorry, I said that's all, but look at the effects of that, is what I'm saying. What's changed? Great, I'm going to go.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify? Oh, sir, please come forward. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, sorry I didn't fill out a form.
You're fine.
My name is Matt Williams. I'm on, my house is on Lakeview Boulevard and Kenny, that intersection. We're actually on another agenda item, but I'll talk about that then. But recently we put in a driveway about 6 months ago, and I was forced to remove all of the hedges on the front because there was a sight distance issue with drivers. But what it did is it's supposed to be safe for drivers because now they can see. Everybody went about 15, 20 miles an hour because it was harder to see. Great, right? Right in front of my house, 20 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. Now they go 35. So in my opinion, it was a negative effect. And so this program to reduce neighborhood collector roadways sounds great, to take it down to 20, so that now it goes back to where, when I purchased the home, that's what I wanted. So, I think it's good that these programs exist to allow you guys and the traffic engineers to figure out how to make these roadways safer. So that's all.
Thank you, sir, thank you. So, anyone else? Okay, we're gonna close the public hearing, and Director and Mr. Farley, if you want to come back, you might have questions. I think one thing for me on this is that, obviously these roads are safe for the cars. I mean, we know, we're not here to discuss the speeds because we feel like there's a safety issue with the cars. And the reason the state, it's all about pedestrian safety, folks on bikes. And one big thing we had been hearing from the community and why we brought this forward was that people just don't feel, while we're fortunate to not have, a very low number of injuries and fatalities, people just in general don't feel safe, necessarily walking around town. And one reason we wanted to include the collectors, as we articulated during our study session, was that these do tend to be the streets where people do the most walking and where the traffic does tend to be a little faster. We also recognize that the speed limit reduction is just one of many tools, that it can be used to get those speeds down. Obviously, the design of the street is a big factor. Enforcement of the speed limit is another big factor. We know that these don't work without enforcement. Even the efforts, I know, the removal of the hedges, that is another effort that we're doing. Because again, that is really helps pedestrians. If people are coming around corners and these hedges, blind corners, it's very dangerous, very dangerous. So we really looking to analyze this policy through the lens of the pedestrians. At least that's, how I see it. And, as someone myself who is a pedestrian I do over 60 miles a week. And I see a lot, and it's unsafe a lot. And I've never been hit, but it's close call after close call after close call. And so I kind of like to look at this through that lens and said, well, what are the vehicle counts in the 85th percent? Like, how comfortable do cars feel driving? It's like, well, how comfortable are pedestrians walking on these streets with cars going high volumes? And when I see some of these 85th percentile speeds on roads that are already signed for 25, that tells me that we do have some work to do as a city in terms of improving that infrastructure to get the speed down, perhaps increasing, and I see the chief there, perhaps increasing enforcement on those particular roadways, because that's very dangerous. And these are also roads that kids are walking to school, and many of them lack that kind of pedestrian infrastructure. So just kind of a key part of what we're doing here. So I do remain in favor of just signing, and also for consistency, signing all of the streets that we're able to at the 20. And I appreciate engineering department's feedback on this, but I'm looking at it from the public's perspective, and as a pedestrian myself, and trying to create an environment that's going to be the most safe. And I agree, we do have other work to do. This is not a cure-all by any means, but if we can couple this effort with additional efforts on the roads where we're not going to just achieve that lower speed through the signage, with the infrastructure improvements and enforcement and education, then I think will hopefully help make a little safer environment all around town. That's what I'm kind of thinking. My colleagues, Councilor Afghan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Full support of what you said. Similar to last time, I think there were a few of us who said we need to be consistent and remove confusion. So I'm still there. I think I heard our traffic engineer saying that where we have a county road with a different speed limit that we cannot change, there may be a confusion for the drivers. So if there are cases like that, I would like to ask us to have that exemption that they can make a decision what makes sense in those areas. So for example, if you have a road that's 20 and then all of a sudden it's 25 for the county and then 20 after that, it's going to create confusion for the drivers. But if it's just one connection, then we want to be consistent. So I'm still 100% for consistency, but if there are places where it creates confusion between city road and county road, I think we may want to consider that as an exception. Thank you.
Councilor Vertical.
I concur with the mayor, and I want to thank you very much, Mr. Farley, for all the work that you've put into this. I really do appreciate it. But I think there's some roads like Green Tree, and I know there's a good chunk of it that actually doesn't have curbs or sidewalks, and I've walked on it on numerous occasions, and it's scary. I know I've talked to neighbors about Goodall, and again, that's just a patchwork. So again, I think we have a lot of these roads that are being recommended for 25 that we've heard from community members, and they're not comfortable on them. They've cited their concerns. And yes, from a driver perspective, I mean, Goodall could be fun to even go more than 25 or more than the average speed of whatever. I can't remember what it said. But just because I might be comfortable driving that doesn't mean that makes sense anymore. I think we have more pedestrians, we have more bikes, we have more e-bikes now, which are putting more. We have the scooters. We just have more going on our roads than I think sometimes what they were maybe designed for. I mean, I think, years ago we were really so car focused, and I think we're slowly starting to change that. So I err on just saying, let's make it 20 across the way. I think also there's some of these collectors, I think some people, they think they're going through a neighborhood. They don't realize it was designed truly as a, especially defined street. I mean, you guys know all the details and, oh, this was designed this way and that means it's this, but the average driver, there are some roads that you might have an exception to, but they don't necessarily know that. And, I'm looking at Lakeview, and the majority of Lakeview is not county. We have that one little strip, and that's a frightening road on most of those sections for a lot of pedestrians. So I err on, it's hard because I hear what Councilor Afghan's saying, I hear what you're saying with that consistency, but I think I'd rather spend our time working with the county and saying, okay, what can we do here, and get that county section down to 20. And maybe that's one of the later ones that we put and make the changes on, and do that. So I am leaning towards just, let's be consistent in terms of, let's just make them all 20, it's plenty.
Thank you, Councilor Vernon. Councilor Wendland?
Well, good luck in getting the county to do anything, but that's just my
Oh, there are
opinion. You've heard me talk about this subject a few times. I'm not really in favor of this. I think statistics actually show, I was on the Transportation Advisory Board 2 or 3 times, I think, and I have to say we have probably one of the best experts in the Northwest with Will Farley on traffic. He is technically superior than I think any discussion I've heard about traffic. And I think one of the things I just want to relay again is that this subject was with the Transportation Advisory Board, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And I know that there's been a couple of communities that have implemented the same program. There just is not a lot of data that shows it makes a big statistical difference. In fact, it's hard to see the actual data or scientific evidence that it has any effect. Would you say that's correct?
Correct.
And so we're making policy, and I agree. Listen, I'm a walker. You all know that I walk a lot in Lake Oswego. Sometimes yes, a lot of times in the dark, early in the morning, and sometimes you play, you don't play chicken, you play dodge the ball or dodge the car sometimes. But that being said, I like policy to make effective changes in people's behavior when there's a good outcome that happens. And I'm just afraid of us setting us up for expectations that are not going to actually come to fruition. I think we saw a few of your examples. I also saw on the Transportation Advisory Board, there's a lot of examples where we've taken data on our own streets, and actually people are going the average 22 miles an hour. I mean, I want to make sure that everyone knows that there's a lot of streets in Lake Oswego that people actually drive fairly slowly on when we've taken traffic samples. So while there is the exception on some of our roads, and I agree, there's some that are very well-designed at 40 miles an hour, and it's a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, that those are definitely ones that we should be putting speed bumps on, doing things that we've done, like we've done on several streets along Lake Oswego, where we've made deliberate, what I call functional solutions to help slow down traffic. I just don't want people to get their expectations up. And I guess I also look at it, we're going to spend $175,000 to do this change, which will really probably be about $225,000 if I know most projects in Lake Oswego. And I just see that we could probably support another quarter or half of a project of pathways with that money. We could do paving, we could do all kinds of things. And I guess I'm just looking at it as there has not been statistically in Lake Oswego, with all the fatality reports and the accident reports and everything else that we've had, they're all on our major arterials. That's where the action is. So we should be spending that money on solving those areas.
Speed cameras, right?
Versus what?
Cameras.
Well, no cameras. Versus spending money on where we're not going to get the bang out of the buck. So I just can't support the investment of taxpayer money for a policy that really is more based on feeling and not on not really on data and actual traffic accident and violation statistics, which I think is what we should be using to establish policy. But I am just one vote, and just I'm all for safety, but I want to do it wisely, and I want to do it off of data and things that will actually make a difference. And the last point I want to make is I don't want to feel like there's going to be this confidence level now with our community that we're adding resources for traffic enforcement, because we've been told that we're not. So we're going to have the same traffic enforcement that we've had, and they can't handle all the things that they're doing on the major thoroughfares. So when we get more and more emails, we're going to have to respond and say, I know, I hear you, that's the law, but we're not going to enforce it. We don't have the resources to do that. So anyway, just a perspective.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I do want to, part of the data, I don't, Mr. Farley, while you're saying there's no results, I'm looking at your presentation you gave us the last study session where you reported vehicles exceeding 30 miles, this is from Portland, 30 miles per hour decreased at 69% of the sites. The 85th percentile speed decreased at 86% of the sites, and the mean speed decreased at 57% of the sites.
Yeah, the Portland study talks that it did reduce by about 1 mile per hour at those sites.
Yes.
There was a positive impact in reducing some of the percentage of driving, but the overall 85th percentile and average speed did not change significantly.
But it did reduce there was a significant reduction in the vehicles going the fastest, over 30 miles an hour, which is part of our rationale. I just want to make clear that there's no data out there.
There is a minimal that study is very confusing in that it looked at a wide range of sites. I can't remember, it was like about 50 sites. And a certain amount showed reduction, but the reduction varied overall. Some sites went up, and overall, there was a 1% or 1 mile per hour decrease over all the sites, 1 mile per hour if you took all the data together. But there were some sites that 57, I think you said, did reduce by some amount. It's just very hard when they're doing a blanket study and then saying, well, some of these reduced, but overall, there was very little effect on driver behavior.
Didn't make it less safe, that's for sure. Yeah, Councilor Corrigan, thank you.
Yeah, I want to say thanks for your careful work. I could spend hours looking at all these maps and trying to figure out why this works. And I do appreciate it, but I think it's our job to look ahead. We are increasing density in Lake Oswego. There's no question about that. We're doing that by policy, by the actual fact of kind of what's been happening. So on my street, There are twice as many houses on it as when I moved in 25 years ago. That's twice as many driveways in a lot of cases. And there are more cars. It's getting harder and harder to actually get out onto the street. So I think it's time to try to make a change, to lay the, I guess, to lay the place and the silverware for the density that's coming. We're required to do it, and I think we need to be thinking about how we get all those folks around. So I guess I'm weighing in on, I would like to see 20 everywhere if we can work that out. And the other thing I'm really not sure about is, we have these county roads in our city. I mean,
Correct.
A lot? Do we have a lot of them?
Quite a few, mostly the Lake Forest and the Rosewood areas
Yeah,
are mostly county roads.
and that's just because those properties haven't annexed in
We
yet.
haven't annexed the properties
Yeah.
in. As
Or the
we
road.
annex a lot of the properties along a roadway, we will make an agreement with the county and take over jurisdiction.
Okay,
But yeah, over in those areas, it's a splattering of
yeah,
county and city,
that makes it
depending
more complicated.
who's annexed and where.
But I think we're also seeing that that's something that's happening. We're going to be dealing with a couple annexations today, and that is seems to be a steady stream. Ever since I've been on council, we have those almost every meeting. So I would really like us to look ahead. I really appreciate your use of data and all the time you put into it, but I think it's time to make the change.
And the kind of way I set up this policy was, we are annexing in, we are getting more roads from the county, we're walking through IGAs, that this is the starting point. As we get these roadways and we build infrastructure that slows people down, or better, design these roads to the proper design for what we want a neighborhood street, then the sign can follow. Putting the sign up first will not have an effect, or a very minimal effect, other than probably getting more phone calls or more complaints of people speeding. In fact, we don't have a big crash issue in this town. I mean, we went through the crash history last time, and then there was one pedestrian fatality in the last 10 years, and on Fernwood, which is one that we've identified to lower to 20. But the speeds on there are already low, and the people are already driving the correct design of the roadway we can follow with the sign to put in. We're not going to create a problem or potentially create a problem by adding a sign that increases variation in driver behavior, putting a new risk on the board. So that's why I introduced this policy as the starting point. Let's look at it, get these that we already believe that they are driving the way they need to. These are 20-mile-per-hour roadways, they're neighborhood streets, all the neighbors on that street are driving appropriately. Let's follow with the sign. On these others, let's make other capital improvements to get to where we want to be, then put the sign in, so we don't create a problem ahead of time.
Well, I think I'm hearing consensus to move ahead with signing all the streets that were authorized to sign as 20. And we hear the engineering department's feedback, which is important. I think we're trying to provide some other input also from the public's perspective on this. And I agree, it has to be a little bit of everything. But I think I'm hearing the council prefer just a consistent approach from the get-go. We're going to have a lot of publicity about this. Let's get the streets signed. In some places, you're correct. It may not, have a bit of a difference, but at least we're getting the education component out there. And we really will need the city manager to work with the police chief on some kind of maybe a change to enforcement. It might be, and that's down the road, because obviously it's going to take you a while just to get the signs out there.
Well, I mean, the chief's here if you want to talk to him about
No, we don't have the
enforcement.
time to talk to him right now. I'm just saying, down the road, we might have to look at these other, whether it's street modifications and things that will come, next year when we have council goal setting and whatnot, to put the other tools in the city manager's hands and to be able to continue advancing our goal that falls along with the pathways that we're constructing and doing this. It's all kind of a part to make the town more pedestrian friendly. So what I'm seeing, though, is a desire of the council to just be very specific with the particular roads that have been identified prior, the collectors in the neighborhood streets, and to return with an ordinance on that. So I'm going to I'd like to make a motion to tentatively approve ordinance 2966, but with the amendments kind of discussed here by the council to do these specific roadways.
How about we don't approve the ordinance? How about you give staff direction to amend the ordinance and bring it back at a future meeting?
Well, that's what I'm going to direct to come back with at a
Right,
future
but
meeting.
if you approve the ordinance, and you're approving the ordinance that's in the packet.
Yeah, I'm just
So
reading
why
what
d-
you guys told me to read, so. Okay, yes, this is what you guys provided me, so.
I just want to actually have time to craft the right language and delete the
Yeah,
correct
so
portions.
I'll make I hear you, City Manager. So I'm going to make a motion to direct staff to come back with an ordinance reflective of the discussion here. Okay, is there a second? Okay, motion's been made by the mayor, seconded by Councilor Corrigan. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-1. All right, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna have to keep plowing through here, guys. Where we're at here. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have the continuation of two ordinances. This is two ordinances, 2958 and 2961. As we know, the council considered these at a prior meeting and applied our policy on kind of pre-annexation tree removals. After that hearing, some of the criteria that the conditions that we applied to those annexations included a tree, a restoration fee, the sum of which we did not realize at the meeting but learned after the fact. And I wanted to bring that back to see if that fee, sum total, was really in line with the council's goals and objectives and in applying those conditions to those applications. So we're going to have, because the scenarios here are very similar in terms of the two lots, which is why we applied the same conditions to both applications, we're going to have just one combined public hearing. We'll start this with a review of that hearing procedure by Ms. Osenak once again.
Thank you, Mayor Buck, members of the council. As we're in a slightly different procedure than we usually are, but Mayor Buck accurately recorded the procedure, but just for the record, what you all did was you approved the voluntary annexation and imposed conditions. What you all did at the prior hearing was to approve the annexation. You opened a public hearing to allow a testimony. You all declared that you did not have any financial conflicts of interest, site visits, et cetera. And you took testimony, you took the staff report, and you imposed conditions. Subsequent, in order to allow you all to reconsider the impact of those conditions, we had a procedural step at our last hearing that you all made a motion to reconsider. And so that is what we're here today, is for you all to reconsider, as the mayor just described, the impact of the conditions, specifically the amount of restoration fees that would be required for each of these applications. So now is the time set for the hearing on this reconsideration of the impact of the fees, specific just to those criterias. We'll start the public hearing with a presentation by staff. If either of the applicants wishes to testify, they can have up to 10 minutes. Any individuals who wish to testify can have up to 5. Any recognized neighborhood associations, homeowners associations, government or government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations can have 10 minutes. If the applicant wishes to have any sort of rebuttal, that can be 5 minutes. The time limits don't include time spent responding to questions from the city council, and any person in attendance may cede his or her time to another person, but in no event shall any person's testimony exceed 10 minutes. And at this point, we're ready to have the staff report.
Thank you. Mayor, members of the council, good afternoon. Following the July 1st hearing, staff calculated the restoration fees as $37,860 for the Kenny Street annexation and $26,696 for the Lakeview Boulevard annexation. And as we have stated before, informed by the amount of these fees, the council voted on July 15th to reconsider the application approvals and directed staff to return today with options for amending the conditions. And I'm hoping that we are here armed with those options. Staff notes that the annexation cases are similar in how the annexation policy applies. And although the tree removal occurred before annexation, staff believes that the tree removals
would likely have met the type 2 tree removal criteria for county certification had the applicants applied in advance. And so in light of this information, if the council chooses to reduce the restoration fee, staff recommends doing so in a consistent manner, for each of the annexation applications, which results in a more equitable treatment of the properties. And so per the council's request, we outlined alternative options for reducing the restoration fees. These include, for the Kenny Street annexation, would be to reduce the fee by 1/2, which would total $18,930, or reduce it by 2/3, which would be $12,872, or waive the restoration fee entirely. Similarly, for the Lakeview Boulevard application, if you reduce the fee by 1/2, you would come up with $13,348. By 2/3, it would be $9,077, or waiving the restoration fee entirely in this case as well. All the other conditions of approval would apply. And then I also want to quickly add that if the applicant has indicated that there's a possibility that all of the mitigation trees might not fit, since it's a 3-to-1 ratio and the lots are fairly small, relatively. So there would be a restoration fee of $172 per tree added to the tree fund if there are trees that could not fit on the property and they had to go somewhere else. So that's what we have.
Any questions for Mr. Espy right now? No? Oh, Councilor Afghan, do you have a question?
What's your recommendation? You just put several options in front of us.
Correct, and I believe that the staff report indicated that we recommended the reduction by 2/3.
Okay, thank
Option
you.
2, yes.
That answered the question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I have 2 folks signed up. If anyone else would like to testify, just let me know or fill out a blue form. Jesse Davis, and hi, Mr. And are you one of the applicants?
I am, yes.
Okay.
For the Kenny Street.
For Kenny Street.
Yes.
So you'll have up to 10 minutes. Thanks for coming.
Awesome. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. As you know, my name is Jesse Davis. Lived in Lake Oswego on and off for 20 years, growing up here since the age of 7. I'm here today representing the Kenny Property Development Annexation. The owners of the property are actually my soon-to-be in-laws, and I'll be overseeing the project and ultimately purchasing the home with my fiance as our personal residents. I want to speak about the fines imposed on us for removing the 5 trees. I attended the last council meeting and would like to clarify a few things, but first I'd like to thank you for the partial approval of the annexation. My fiance and I are excited to start our family in the city we both love and call home, and for our future children to grow up in a welcoming and beautiful community. There was a question in the last meeting about, was this premeditated? It was not. We originally planned to keep the property in Clackamas County and use the existing septic system to help manage our construction costs. Later, we found out that the septic was failing, and the county required us to tie in to the nearby sewer because we were within 300 feet. That change triggered a need to annex and shifted our development plans. At the time the trees were removed, we were still under county jurisdiction and followed their codes. The 5 trees we removed were in direct conflict with the planned home location. After learning we had to connect a sewer, we explored dividing the property to build 2 homes. That plan was denied due to a shortfall of 600 square feet on the property, forcing us to return to the original plan to build 1 home with an ADU for my aging mother, so we can care for her as she ages in place. We are not a large developer. We're a local family who have been here for a long time. We're trying to continue to build our life here, and a nearly $40,000 fine is a serious financial burden on our family. We understand why the city has its tree codes, and we love the landscape here, totally understand it. And so when we went to go remove these trees per the Clackamas County Code, we also looked at, we had 35 trees on the property, roughly. We didn't want to change the environment and the landscape of the street for the neighbors, as we wanted to be considerate with them, which is why we only removed the trees that were going to be in the way of the construction, or the land print for the home. We're happy to mitigate the trees we removed, and we do have an extensive landscape plan that enhances both our property and the surrounding area for the neighbors. However, we do feel that the 3-to-1 mitigation ratio is excessive for the size of the lot and ask that that be considered along with the restoration fines. What is especially frustrating is that what I've seen living here over the last 20 years of my life is that large-scale developers have regularly come in and clear-cut dozens of trees with little to no meaningful penalties. Meanwhile, families like ours trying to preserve as much as possible are hit with the full weight of the code. We ask that you consider this imbalance and the burden placed on small homeowners compared to large developers when you go through another review of our annexation, mitigation, and fines. And I thank you for your time and consideration in reviewing this.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
Yep.
Okay, Matt Williams are up again. And are you also applicant on the other property?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, so similar, you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and councilors. So, yes, we purchased the property about 1.5 years ago. We moved here to attend schools and be a part of this community. So my wife right here, Mallory, is sitting behind me. She recently become the new pre-K teacher at River Grove. As we moved here, that was one of the reasons. Our daughters Mila and Lauren attend River Grove Elementary. It was a challenge to find a home in that school district where we could call home, so we had to settle for a fixer-upper. The main issue at hand is these trees that we removed. I suppose as new homeowners in the area, we did not have all the information needed to avoid problems with the annexation process. As homeowners, we contacted several tree companies to remove these trees. We were informed by all of them, including PGE, that we were in Clackamas County and we didn't need permits or any jurisdiction problems, so we kind of moved forward. PGE even helped remove 3 of the trees as they were impeding on the power lines. As far as we knew it, that is all that we needed. We were not informed to reach out to Lake Oswego by any of the tree companies. It wasn't until we started to have problems with our septic system that we decided we needed to connect to the public sewer. This is when we found out all the information about how we should have applied for the tree certification process to avoid the scenario that we were in. We are making many remodeling improvements to the existing home, increasing its value for the neighborhood. We've had so many compliments and appreciative neighbors for restoring the home. We're not removing the home, we're adding value, and we're not tearing it down or anything like that. I understand these policies are in place to protect against developers coming in, clear-cutting lots and building homes, but we're just homeowners trying to contribute to the local Lake Oswego community and are very involved with the River Grove School. I'm even in the process of purchasing a commercial property in Lake Oswego to move my business here from Beaverton. But with the way we're being welcomed to Lake Oswego by the city council, makes me wonder if I should conduct business in Lake Oswego. I hope you can reconsider the consequences imposed on our case and allow our family to be welcomed with open arms so we can help thrive in this community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. And I guess we entertain a motion. Would someone like to make a motion? Councilwoman? You have questions?
Can I ask a question or just
Of course.
get some thoughts? Mr. Espy, you indicated that the if they would have applied, if they were in Lake Oswego, that the permits would have been approved?
That's correct. The report indicated it was difficult to determine whether or not there would be any impacts to the future development versus the trees because we didn't really have that kind of information. But it appeared, since the trees that were removed were not considered significant, that they would likely be approved. The only problem that the reviewer had was with criterion 1 in the tree removal application, but it's likely that it could have been approved, yes.
And it's $172 to buy into the tree fund for mitigation for the trees?
For all of those trees that don't fit on the property. So it's a 3-to-1 mitigation ratio to try to fit all the trees on the properties. But if they don't fit, then an additional $172 per tree would need to be levied for any trees that would have to be planted off property.
Right, and so typically we have, that's for just a type 1 tree is the 3-to-1. Is that correct? Or what's the 3-to-1? I mean,
The 3-to-1 is an enhanced mitigation requirement for not complying essentially with the type 2 criteria. Typically, we require 1-to-1 mitigation for tree removal.
It comes out of Resolution 1959.
Right, so if it's a 1-to-1, and they probably would have been approved had they submitted their application if they were a resident of Lake Oswego. So they would have a 1-to-1 requirement?
Correct.
Okay. Just thoughts. I mean, I said it before at the previous meeting, I think we need to welcome people with open arms. We want people in Lake Oswego. I guess I'm looking at, it probably would have helped if you guys would have come and testified at the original meeting. But that's okay. You don't know city life, and you're not really affected in city life until you get involved in this real life situation. So I would propose that we would go to the 1-to-1, and just to make it fair, that we would charge $172 for each of the trees that they removed of the, and I don't know, one was 6 trees and one was 5. And that would be the fine. And then they can still plant other trees. But I guess I don't look at it as our job is to be punitive. Our job is to try to mitigate real-life situations.
You know, it's a tricky thing for us too, because we don't really look at intent in these matters. Like the policy doesn't say, well, if you did it intentionally or not intentionally. It's just really because we don't want to telegraph that if you do a and these folks, of course, we believe, them both, but that we don't want to telegraph that if you do a pre-annexation tree removal and come to the council and just say that you didn't know, that would say, oh, well, it's fine too. So that's kind of the spot, that we're in, is ensuring that, obviously, the policy states that we wouldn't even let folks annex. And so that we didn't want to go there, because we do appreciate folks coming in, and we have housing goals, and that seemed excessively punitive. And obviously, we're here again today because the tree restoration fines also seemed excessively punitive. But I also don't know if we want to wipe all of it away and send that, well, as long as you come to the council with that we won't follow the policy, otherwise we might as well just get rid of the policy, So I think that's the balance we're
I understand
in. That's
that.
just my response.
Right, no, I understand that.
Okay.
I'm just saying that.
No, I hear you too,
Yeah,
Councilor.
they did not know that they were going to have a septic tank that they had to repair.
Well, I mean, everyone can say that, though. Councilor Afghan.
There are a couple of things on my mind that I wanted to share, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you for coming and testifying. Similar to Councilor Wedland, I wish you were here last time, and it would have made things a little streamlined. I found both of you to be sincere, and I'm going to consider your testimony in my decision today. That's one. The second thing is, our policies are not in place to deter developers. Our policies are in place to have this beautiful city for all of us and develop. So that's for coexistence. And sometimes you see developers coming and getting approval for clear cut. That has a very specific reason for it. And I don't want to hear that people say, well, those guys can do it, why can't I? Mine is a smaller, why are you penalizing me? And that's not the case here. I heard that from both of you, and I don't think that's true for me. Having said that, we want to be welcoming, but we don't want to have a signal to everybody that you can do this and then apply to be annexed. And the policy says if you do it, you're not welcome. But I think because both of you showed up and very sincere, at least my decision is going to consider that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Effian. Councilor Corrigan.
Well, along those same lines, you're lovely people. We're very happy to have you. Our city will be better for you. But the concern I think that we're trying to express is that I asked for a GIS survey of properties that are in the city's urban service boundary, but that are not yet annexed. Turns out the total acreage for all that land is 882 acres of property. And so we are shooting for a 50% canopy here in our city to maintain the quality of life that we enjoy today, that we all appreciate. So it turns out that there are 22,134 properties like yours that are eligible but not yet annexed. So I hope you won't take this too personally. The issue is that we're looking ahead and we're thinking about all this property that will come in, and we need to treat people fairly and equitably. It's not personal. That's the point that I wanted you to be aware of, and I want everyone to think about all that's out there that is here to come. So I do appreciate you coming to testify. It changes my perception. I had no idea who you were, why things happened the way they did, or your appreciation for us or our trees. So thank you for coming, and I will take your testimony into consideration as well.
Councilor Burdick.
I concur with my colleagues, and I want to say thank you, Councilor Corrigan, for that information. And I also want to thank you both for coming to testify today. It really, it means a lot, and I will also take your testimony into consideration. But we are dealing with kind of a tough balance, and I think I won't spend much time, reiterating what my colleagues have already said. But again, it's that tough balance of, we do have codes, they're in place. But I think you're hearing an agreement, at least amongst all of us, that the amount is excessive. And in my opinion, that needs to be, brought down. And, possibly looking at, do we maintain the 3-to-1? Do we maybe say 1-to-1? How do we want to look at that? But I will definitely be taking your testimony into consideration. And I thank you very much for showing up. And, again, we're having to deal with code and different things. So as Councilor Corrigan said, this is not personal, and we do want you to be welcomed. We're very excited to have you here, and thank you for all your work at the schools and helping our schools maintain their credibility and their excellence. So again, we do want to welcome you, and thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you, Councilor Burdick. I'll take it. Let me just go a stab with staff recommendation here. I move to enact Ordinance 2958 with the 2/3 reduction in the tree restoration fee, and direct staff to return on September 2nd, 2025 with a final version of the ordinance, including findings and conclusions. Is there a second? Would you like to make a second?
I second that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Discussion, Councilor Wendland?
Would you consider going down to 25%? Instead of a third? I just look at it from this viewpoint, that they would have gotten the permit if they would have been in the city.
Yes, yes. I'll amend my motion for reduction of 25%. You agree?
225.
Yeah,
25%.
I'd also like to see a 1-to-1 versus a 3-to-1.
Yes, and a 1-to-1.
And a 1-to-1, and a 1-to-1 mitigation.
We're going to be very welcoming tonight.
Okay, can you just repeat the motion so that you have a clean motion?
Move to enact Ordinance 2958 with a reduction of the tree restoration fee to 25%
Yes.
of the amount, and 1-to-1 mitigation.
I second that.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. Also move to enact ordinance 2961 with a reduction in the tree restoration fee to 25% of the amount previously set, and change in the mitigation to 1-to-1.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0.
And that's a tentative approval. with
Tentative
final
approval,
findings.
yes, and also direct staff to return, yes, on September 2nd, 2025 with the findings.
Right.
Thank you both very much, and applicants, thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Respy. Thank you, Ms.
And welcome to Lake Oswego.
Thank you. Glad to have you
Come
here.
over anytime and we can have a glass of wine.
And Ms. Director Namanu, don't go too far. Don't go anywhere, actually. We're doing a great job. We're gonna power through here. Next item on our agenda is item 10.1. We have Director Namanu here to talk about the tree amendment update project. This is a study session. And you're here with, oh, yes.
Yes,
with
thank you,
friends.
Mayor and councilors. Jessica Numanalu, Community Development Director, and with me tonight is Sachi Arakawa. She is with Cascadia Partners, who is the consultant for this tree regulation amendment project. And I believe you are all very familiar with Morgan Holan, who is the consulting arborist for the planning department and also a member of the project team. I was going to do some introductory comments. I know that you are all on a tight schedule as you've got some great neighborhood celebrations to go to for National Night Out, so I will keep it very brief and just say that the last meeting that we had with the council on the tree code project was back in November of 2024, in which I got initial direction from the council before putting out a request for proposals for this project. And the direction at that time was we're going to focus on targeted amendments to the tree code in alignment with the recommendations of the Urban and Community Forestry Plan. And so our consultant tonight is going to go over the project scope and schedule as well as the timeline. And what we're looking here is feedback from the council on the scope, schedule, and timeline, as well as any additional issues that you would like us to consider before we move forward with the project. So not a lot of heavy items tonight to discuss, but important to get your feedback before we move forward, because this is sort of the kickoff to the project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sachi.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Mayor and councilors. So like Jessica said, yeah, we're just here to introduce the project, to get you all familiar with the scope, the schedule, and the major key issues that we're going to be focusing on. And it seems like the theme of the afternoon is trees. So we'll continue that theme on here. So this is our agenda. I'll introduce myself and our project team. We'll give you a little background on the project. I know you all are relatively familiar with or are very familiar with the Urban and Community Forestry Plan, and obviously from the last conversation know a bit about your tree code and tree regulations, but I'll just give a little more background. We'll talk about the schedule, and then we'll have an opportunity for you to give feedback and ask questions at the end. All right, so this is our project team. Jessica introduced herself and Morgan. You all know them already. We also have Daphne Sissel, who is a city planner and works a lot with permitting and current planning. And then our consultant team is made up of Cascadia Partners, and that's my firm. We're based in Portland, and we do work in a wide range of planning topics, from housing, land use, to environment and engagement. My focus is primarily environmental planning. I have a background in urban forestry, and I do a lot of tree code and tree policy throughout the region. I will be focusing on tree policy engagement and facilitation in this project, as well as helping to project manage, along with my colleague Sarah Goldstein, who is with us here, and Pauline Rueg, who's our code development expert, who's also with us. And we have a consulting arborist on our team who will be helping us with technical arborist matters as well. All right, so just to level set here, like, why does tree code matter? Why are we talking about tree code, and why are we updating our tree code now? So as we've kind of already heard from folks that live here and from you counselors, trees are very critical to Lake Oswego's identity. Lake Oswego is known for its big, beautiful trees and all the benefits that go along with them, public health, environmental benefits, and of course our aesthetic benefits as well, and the identity that the big mature trees bring. And Lake Oswego has one of the highest tree canopies in the region of any city of comparable size at 53.4%. That is a really significant tree canopy, and we know that the community values these trees and we want to care for them and maintain that canopy. But the vast majority of these trees are actually not managed by the public sector. They are only 20% of the tree canopy is on city-owned and managed properties and public right-of-way, and about 80% is on private properties and non-city-owned or managed public properties. So tree code is a really important part of tree management because it helps us regulate and manage these trees that are not managed by the city. And the city's kind of taking a two-prong approach here. So one of those prongs is tree code, updating our tree code to help regulate trees that are in the public realm, and also education and outreach, which is really important, right? We've already heard from residents tonight about the fact that, you know, not understanding the tree code and tree regulations leads to a lot of confusion and, you know, potential expense and other issues. And folks need to understand how to plant trees, how to maintain trees, and how to preserve trees, and what they do in development or non-development situations when they need to remove a tree. So education and outreach is also important, along with updating and refreshing the tree regulations. And those are both outlined in the Urban and Community Forestry Plan, which I know you all are familiar with and were involved with during its update over the last couple of years. Right. So Urban and Community Forestry Plan was updated and adopted last June 2024. And as sort of the next step, the city is updating these tree regulations, which include tree-related provisions in the Community Development Code, as recommended by the Urban and Community Forestry Plan. And so this effort was part of City Council goal in 2025, and will focus targeted updates on the tree code and the Community Development Code to ensure alignment with best management practices from around the region, long-term urban forest sustainability goals for the city, and importantly, compliance with state laws, including state laws around housing. We know a lot of good work has already been done in terms of tree policy and sort of programming. You have your 2013 comp plan that has sort of guidance around trees, the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, and the recently adopted UCFP that I just mentioned. And I want to maybe dwell a little bit on the UCFP. I know you all were familiar and a part of that process, but I just want to remind us of the key findings of that report because those were really important in guiding this work and all of the sort of urban forestry work that's going to happen in the city over the next few years. So there were 9 findings, and I'm just going to go through them quickly, as we're most likely all relatively familiar. Number 1 is that the city needs an updated public tree inventory to make informed urban forest management decisions. The city's tree management responsibilities must be clarified. We need to know who is doing what and be communicating with each other within the public sector. Portions of the city's tree code lack clear and objective standards. So this is an important one that I want to talk about quickly because this relates to housing and the state mandate that development code related to housing needs to be clear and objective. And so this is a really important one that the code can address. And a big part of tree code, not just in Lake Oswego, but around the region. I work in a lot of regions, or in a lot of cities in this region, talking about tree code and updating their tree code. And as we've already kind of touched on tonight, there is a tension and a balance between housing and trees. You know, they both compete for space. They're both very important. They both provide public benefits, and so there is a balance that we need to strike there. And I think one of the counselors referred to it, though, as something that that should coexist, that it's not necessarily a conflict. It's just finding the right balance where we're allowing for both to the extent that we can. And you know, we know that trees have so much value in residential areas. Trees have so much value to homes, and you know, they help us with shade and energy efficiency, cleaner air. And so the benefits that trees bring to, when paired with housing, can't be understated, but we know that sometimes trees need to be cut down to make room for development. And so that is a balance that this project is going to focus on striking, and we'll look forward to having more conversations with council about that moving forward. So I just want to kind of highlight that as we're talking here about finding number 3. So finding number 4, the city already has a dense canopy, over 50% citywide tree canopy. And so we should prioritize canopy management and maintenance rather than necessarily continued and perpetual expansion. Climate change effects climate change has had serious effects on Lake Oswego's urban forest. Invasive pest and plant management is important. We know emerald ash borer is in the region and is coming to Lake Oswego, and other pests and pathogens can be a threat, so we want to be prepared for that. And as I just pointed out, most of the citywide tree canopy cover is located on private property and non-city owned or managed public property. So this is an important one for tree code because we want to be able to regulate and have some control over how trees are removed and cared for in the public realm. And there are threats to short-term and long-term health and sustainability of Lake Oswego's urban forest that are not well understood by the public, and more transparency in tree removal permit data is also needed. And then finally, ending on a positive note here, the Lake Oswego community is active, engaged, and strongly values the city's natural resources, including trees. So those are the 9 findings from the UCFP, which we will be keeping in mind. We're drawing from that work as we're going into this tree regulation update. However, there are findings in the UCFP that the tree code update will not address, right? The UCFP identified issues that we will build on, but this is part of a bigger policy package that includes many tools. Tree code is one of those tools, but it is not the only tool. You know, the city is in the process of recruiting an urban forester, and many other things are happening to support all the goals in the UCFP along with the tree code update. What this project will do is code and regulation amendments that will meet many of the goals identified in the plan. And so with that, I want to actually talk about some of the key code issues that we've identified based on our review of the UCFP, and kind of vet these by you all, making sure that this is resonating, that we're not missing anything. So I'm going to read through these, and then I'm going to go through just our scope of work and kind of the phases that we're going to do, so you understand you know, the tasks that we'll be laying out in the project. We'll have a few more touch points with this group, so I wanted to point that out, and then we'll have time for discussion. But if anyone wants to jump in and stop me while I'm talking through this list, feel free. Okay, so these are the key code issues we have identified thus far. The first is, as mentioned before, creating clear and objective standards for needed housing. Then ensuring consistent tree permitting between development and non-development type permits. So permits where, new construction is happening versus permits where it's landscaping or something smaller scale. Then creating incentives for tree preservation, creating soil volume standards for street trees and parking lots, ensuring that trees have plenty of space to grow and succeed in their lifespan. Creating canopy standards for commercial and industrial development, requiring mitigation trees for more tree removal permit types, evaluating tree code for wildfire-safe landscaping practices, and codifying the requirement to plant large mitigation trees where possible. We also had a couple additional issues that weren't identified from the Urban and Community Forestry Plan. I believe that were actually identified at a council meeting that happened after the plan was updated, but I wanted to put these in front of you as well, and these are things that we will consider issues if that makes sense to the project management team and council. So these issues are addressing disease or semi-hazardous trees that don't qualify for removal under any of the current tree removal types, scaling mitigation to the environmental value of the tree removed, and then options for addressing dead and dying trees on neighboring properties. So when there are dead or dying trees that aren't on your property that you potentially want to see removed or have action around. So those are the additional issues, and those will potentially be added to our key issues. And now let me just give you a rundown of the phases of work.
Did you say we
have.
can interrupt you for questions?
You may, yes.
Okay, could you go back
and we'll have
to
time for discussion at the end, but feel free to jump in
Could you go
now.
back to the previous page and just slightly elaborate on the second bullet? Scaling mitigation to the environmental value of the tree removed.
Well, I can speak to that. So this came from the council study session that was on November 24th, and there were a few councilors that wanted us to not, they felt that the one-to-one mitigation was not sufficient and that we should consider the overall environmental value of the tree in requiring mitigation. There's nothing specified as to what that means, but it's something more meaningful than just one-to-one mitigation. So we'll be looking in this project at various options for, I guess, better capturing what the value of the tree is and how we can better mitigate for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that and the other key finding, which was codifying the requirement to plant large mitigation trees where possible, comes from one of the findings, which was in the Urban and Community Forestry Plan, and I think also in the State of the Urban Forest Report, that a lot of oftentimes the replacement trees that were being planted were much smaller stature, didn't have as much value to the community in terms of, environmental benefits, shade.
That's a dogwood issue. It's the dogwood
That
issue.
is exactly right. We're removing Doug firs and replacing them with dogwoods. So this is something you all may have heard before, but we've had then a few key issues that we want to look at and consider, especially related to mitigation fees, to kind of right-size that so that we're not just seeing only small ornamental trees planted. We love dogwoods, but we also really love our big trees, and we know that they are also more challenging, and it's maybe the path of least resistance to plant smaller form trees, so there might need to be a little bit of regulatory teeth that holds people accountable to try to plant as big of a tree as possible to get the maximum benefits, right? Okay. And I'll let you all marinate on any other sort of questions or comments you have on the key code issues as I start just elaborating on the phases of work. So this project's about a year long. Our first task is to do a code and policy update, so that's looking at your development code, interviewing city staff who worked on the Urban and Community Forestry Plan, summarizing those results. We'll also do a best practices and alternatives review, so looking at smart practices from around the region and in peer jurisdictions that we could potentially model. So find examples of good practice that the city could potentially use for code amendments. We'll have a tree task force with us throughout the duration of the project, made up of key stakeholders. We also have opportunities for broader community engagement. So we're doing a set of community focus groups and interviews, and then at least one public open house. So going back to the idea that community outreach, education, and buy-in is really important in this process, and that's built into our scope. And then finally, we'll be doing code concepts, so basically different alternatives that we can explore that could become potential code amendments. Then we'll do the actual code amendments, which will be reviewed by our tree task force, city advisory boards, and a city council work session with you all. And that'll lead to our final draft, which will be reviewed by Planning Commission and Council. And I'm going to try to go quickly here because I know we all want to get to these fun neighborhood events. So this is the schedule. Again, about a year-long process. And in yellow here on the bottom, we just have, well, actually yellow at the top here. This is our meeting today, our kickoff meeting with you all. And then there's 3 more opportunities for you to hear about the work and weigh in on the code concepts, the amendments, and then, the final draft. All right, so with that, I'll just leave you with these couple discussion questions. I'm happy to go back to any of the slides that we looked at already. So my questions for you are, do you have any feedback or questions about our scope of work? And then are any of the key issues that I mentioned, do you want to highlight any for us to kind of elevate or that are particularly important to you? And is there anything missing?
Thank you, Sachi. Great presentation. Councilor Verdict, go ahead.
Thank you, and I think you've captured most of what I'd like to see done, but one thing that I'm not seeing, which I think is important to consider, and maybe it's kind of buried in one of those other tasks, is street trees and the importance of getting those street trees so that we're keeping the hard surfaces cooler during those months. So that's just something that I think we should also consider, so we're not chopping away everything next to the roads and then the roads are heating up.
So I'm hearing the importance of street trees for shade. Yes.
Yeah, because we really don't, I had the same question, because we really don't talk, unless someone's removing a street tree, then we'll say, oh, you got to replace the street tree. But otherwise, we really don't even talk about street trees.
We do require street trees in certain neighborhoods. So for instance, in First Edition, Forest Hills, they require 2 street trees for every 50 feet of frontage for any new single family or new dwelling that's proposed. Old Town also has a street tree requirement. And then we have street tree requirements for any project that involves a minor development. So like partitions, other land divisions, that type of thing. But one of the recommendations, and again, we have a Appendix A of the Urban Community Forestry Plan is a complete annotated copy of the Community Development Code and the tree code. So there's lots in there, and I think we tried to capture the broad categories. But one of those specific recommendations is looking at requiring more street trees for more development types. So why just in First Edition do we require street trees for new single or new dwellings? Perhaps that could be something we could require citywide.
That's great. Good comment. Yeah, thank you very much. Councilor Afghan.
Thank you very much for listing all those items. It made an impact on how I was envisioning in a good way, how you're going systematically with scope and schedule. I'm big on environmental impact. That's why I asked that question, to understand the depth of scope you have listed there. So I totally disagree with cutting down a huge tree and replacing it with a 2-inch tree when we know there is an environmental impact. So I'm glad you have that. At the same time, there are cases when mental health is also in play. So we've had several cases where a family are terrified with the storm and this single big tree that's going to scare them so bad that their mental health is impacted. So if we could also look at those cases where there are these cases justified to cut a tree, but at the same time, the environmental impact needs to be assessed and the replacement of those trees can be also balanced.
Yeah, I think that, post ice storm in particular, there are a lot of mixed feelings about trees. As much as Lake Oswego loves your trees, especially your large trees. And this is true of the whole region, including Portland, where I do a lot of work. There's a lot of fear around trees too. We've seen a lot of trees fall and do damage. And so I think that's addressing that is in part outreach education, making sure our team and the city kind of has information for people about what safety looks like, how to identify hazard trees. And I think as a region and even as a state, that's a conversation that people are having right now about, like how to, like at what point do we say it's okay to remove a tree that's maybe not completely hazardous, just preemptively because of safety, because we know that these storms are happening. I think in the case of the ice storm, it was literally kind of the perfect storm of factors that led to a lot of the tree loss, and I know Morgan could speak to that much better than I could as an arborist. But I think it's a conversation that we all need to get on the same page on, and then be able to message to the public in a way that's clear and kind of gives them the understanding and confidence to continue to have their healthy trees and maintain them. So that we're not losing trees out of fear, because we don't want to lose trees out of unfounded fear, but we also understand that there is very real fear, and it is part of mental health, right? And that's an important thing to consider. So I appreciate that, and that's definitely on our minds. And I think there's some probably calibration within how the permits are done and other aspects of the code that we're going to be talking about related to hazard trees and how to remove them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to second that comment as well. We've heard from arborists that in Lake Oswego, we just tend to wait until the tree is so dead that it's almost dangerous to remove, at that point. And so creating more flexibility there for hazard and dying trees. So it's great to see that on the list where we're not waiting, and honestly, that's kind of the other issue. If you have a property owner who's willing to go through the expense and take it down, instead of them passing the house on to the next owner, they don't want to remove it. And then we have the other issue where the neighbor's saying, hey, you're not removing your dead tree. It's like, well, hey, we got the willing person. And we know it's going to be dead eventually. Of course, they'll all be dead eventually, but, in some, more near-term scenario that
We could have a volcano go up no.
Okay, Councilor Wendland, go ahead. Eventually, yes. We're all.
So this is great work, and I think you articulated in those 9 objectives. I think that really helps, and the additional things. One thing that is an overarching concern of this council is the housing production, how it all intertwines and whatever. And one of the things that I think we are all after is to try to, one of the key ingredients of Lake Oswego is that we're fighting against, well, I don't know fighting against, but it's just a reality, is the cost of housing. And I think we need to be mindful of anything that we put in as far as policy to make it somewhat neutral, so that we're not continuing to add more and more to the cost of housing, because we're, even our middle housing, we have a great little cottage cluster going up, and I hear they're going to be selling for $800,000, and it's a small little, tiny little house. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how do we get to that part of middle housing without continuing to add more and more costs? So that's one thing that having a 30,000-foot level on whatever we decide is to make sure that we're looking at cost. I think we all need, I certainly need, a seminar, or it could be part of a study session, on what in the heck is clear and objective, and what can we get away with, and what would be examples. Everyone has been talking about it forever, and I, for one, and I probably, I've heard it probably for almost, 10 years, that we need to be clear and objective. I still probably could not give a 30-second talk on what that really means. And so I think if we can get some sort of education on that, that would really be helpful, as well as a tree task force group, or the, whatever we're calling this group. I'm the liaison, so anything that you guys need, any thoughts that you have, just talk and you can channel them through me. And I think one thing that's not in any discussion here, and I know we talked about housing production, whatever, is the fact of property rights. And that's a kind of some people have that as a founding principle, that people live in Lake Oswego, and other people, it never comes up. And I just want to have some sort of an overview of making sure that we're balancing. I like your idea of the balancing, to Councilor Afghan's thing of balancing nature and people, and I think we need to have that. And that's what makes Lake Oswego wonderful. I think one of our big challenges is obviously to be in balance with everything, and it's always hard to figure out where that is. But I do think that it doesn't happen until you're doing a project or you're wanting to do something that you all of a sudden find out what the, we have two examples of people that are building, and they're the exact example that we need to be mindful of as we go through this process, to say, you know what, they're doing the right thing, and they're doing the right thing for their families, and we want to ensure that we're giving them as much support as we can through good policy. And so, so it's that weighing of, regulation versus property rights, and figuring out what that good intersection is. And last thing, fire prevention is one of those, I would say, we've had a really good summer, knock on wood. So far, it's not over, but we are still worried, and it's a long way from over, and we've lucked out. But we've had 5 years of just infernos, and I know that that's what a lot of people have in their heads. And so just, I'm not saying you're going to solve this through this policy thing, but figuring out sort of a dialogue, or having a discussion of this is, I know Mountain Park went through a great, whatever you call it, eradication of underlying brush, and they've got a plan, and it's, and how do we get that formulated into maybe policy, or figuring out how we can get that to the rest of Lake Oswego, because I know communities like Caldera and Sun River and Black Butte and all these Central Oregon communities, they're doing all this fire mitigation plan exercises and actually doing some good work. And I think that's really important for us to keep our 53%. If we do have a fire, we're very susceptible. So anyway, great work, great, lot of information. It'll be interesting to see how the tree task force can absorb the volume of information they need to deal with over the next 6-7 meetings. But I know you're going to have a lot of fun orchestrating that, so thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Councilor Rowe.
6-hour meetings, that's how we're going to
Yeah,
do it.
that's,
So
yes.
get
that's
ready,
good.
buckle up.
Right.
Kidding. Thank you for being our liaison to that group. We appreciate it, Counselor.
Thank you, Councilor Wendland. Yeah, I think that one of the goals, I think it was on the slide of the urban community forest plan, is to encourage the preservation, and to Councilor Wendland's point as well around around the property rights and and preservation, I think in a way that when we provide some kind of flexibility, we almost get more compliance. When people feel like it's so rigid, that's when we start getting less, about wanting, because then everyone's being told what to do, and people value the trees. I mean, we got to go into the process knowing everyone values the trees that we have in the community. There's not one half of the community that values them, the other half just can't wait to cut them down, the second. It's ridiculous. People want to have the trees, they add a lot of value in many different ways. And so if we can, being able to provide that kind of flexibility, I think puts the power more into the people's hands, with appropriate regulation, to be able to feel like they are the ones making, the community is the ones making, of course, the community is the ones making the decisions. We are a democracy, but in general, like, individual property owners can make those decisions. They're not just doing things because they're being told to. That just creates automatic resistance. Well, maybe I do want to get rid of this tree, even you tell me I can't, when otherwise they'd probably take great care of it. So I think and I see that on here. I don't know if that's part of the standards to lessen the differences between kind of redevelopment and not, looking at trees that are within a buildable footprint, as if they want to take up the whole footprint, we got no problem, let them take it down. But if they just want to take it down, and we kind of say, well, you better have a good reason, and so is that something that we're...
Yeah, that was one of the key findings, was trying to sort of make the development versus non-development reason for removal, trying to bring those more in alignment. Of course, there's trade-offs when you do that, right? If you have for instance, the same criteria that apply to both, that is going to be equal or fair treatment, but it also means that there's less flexibility, especially because the standards will have to be clear and objective, and we'll try to help define what that means, because it is a difficult concept. I mean, an easy, clear, and objective standard is a setback, 25 feet, right? That's measurable, it's clear, it's objective. People aren't going to disagree on, what the setback is. But when you do that, then that means there's no flexibility. It's quite rigid. And so, yeah, there's going to be probably not a perfect solution to it, but we're going to provide some policy options to address that very issue of, because we do hear that from everyone, is that development is treated differently than non-development, which is true to a lot of extent, because we can't, because of our clear and objective standards that apply to housing, we cannot reduce the size of housing through the tree code. That is established by the zoning code. So that is true to an extent that it is treated differently.
There's always mitigation. I mean, we have more canopy
Right.
now than we did many generations ago, not because trees haven't been cut down, trees have been removed, but many have been planted, and preserving that canopy and enhancing its health. I'm sure we can accomplish all of it.
Yeah, and I think mitigation and just having options for people, variety of options while maintaining clear and objective standards, but having options for what happens when a tree does need to be removed, rather than just saying a tree can't be removed or you can't do this. I think having those options and having a good sort of menu of mitigation choices that makes sense, it does introduce that flexibility. It doesn't feel like someone is, faced with just one option. They have choices that they can make that, can fit their situation the best. And it feels more reasonable.
That's right. It's great. And Councilor Corrigan, thanks for your patience.
I just have a couple of quick questions. First of all, thank you for your work on this. It's very exciting to see this move forward. The two things that occurred to me, I'm just wondering if your work will incorporate insight or intelligence into how other communities have threaded the needle on clear and objective. Are those things well known? Do you talk to each other? I mean, so we don't have to recreate the wheel, or we can learn from other people?
Yes. So part of the work is a best practices review, and that is part of our scope. But the good news is that we already are working in a lot of communities on tree code. I'm working in Gresham right now. We've worked in the city of Beaverton and Portland. The bad news is a lot of the cities are not necessarily talking to each other as much as I wish they were. But just because everyone's busy and kind of in their own world. But I think that as a lot of these tree codes are being updated and the Oregon Department of Forestry is becoming more of a convener in the state for people to kind of have more of sort of best practice sharing and coalition building amongst the public sector, that there will be more information sharing. And I know this team is very open to that. And, we've built that into the scope in learning about best practices throughout Oregon and in peer cities, potentially around the country, but mostly in our area. And there is a lot of tree code updates happening in Oregon, and they all, are in cities that need to be compliant with state law. So it is a very live topic. Bend has recently kind of notoriously updated their code and had some bumps along the way, but they're, if you've been following it, it's an interesting process. I'd recommend kind of, following that process. It's some learning lessons there for this city as we're moving into a tree code update. But yeah, there are many cities facing housing crisis, housing production needs, and working on balancing those. And so there is a lot of, to use a tree metaphor, a lot of ripe fruit to pick in terms of best practices and models, or at the very least, like lessons that we can take from other places. And that'll be an essential part of the project for sure.
Yeah, so that was a segue to my next question, which is, is there any contemplation in this of how the brand new housing laws from Salem may impact our tree codes? Do you guys, is there any problem there? Have you had any look forward, any insight? Has anybody talked about that? So if we build this and then we find out, oops, a law just passed last month, then what do we do?
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I thank you for asking that. Well, we know that HB 2138 just passed, and one of the provisions in there is it specifically, we've always had a requirement that any criteria that applies to housing has to be clear and objective. And what HB 2138 does is it specifies that a tree code has to be clear and objective. So, and it also, well, I won't get into the details. I could get down to the nitty-gritty details, and there's no need to do that. So yes, the bottom line is we did look at that. I would say everything else from HB 2138, it's not really necessarily tree-related. It's just that because we have to allow more density and more housing types, that's just going to have a bigger impact on trees. So one of the things that we have to look at is what are ways that, are there incentives that we can have to encourage people to save trees in development, because it's going to be harder when you have more density. What are ways that we can try to plant more trees to make up for the trees that are lost for development? Like the street tree planting is one thing that we can look at. How can we make sure that where there's room that we get larger stature trees? So these are the kinds of things that we're going to have to look at to sort of do that balancing between housing and trying to maintain our tree canopy. And it's gonna be tough, but I think there's options for us to look at.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, you guys are all over it, so thank you.
Councilor Corrigan. The only last thing I had was with I think it's good to look at the dead trees in the neighboring lot as a nuisance. But recently, we modified this our code on this around I know Martha's not gonna like this, but around the ivy and the invasive species, whatnot. But the problem is you got the ivy and the invasives killing, the trees, and so when they're kind of a precursor, they can be. It's not the only reason the trees die. And so I really think we should look at those together. I know it's a pain, all of it, it's not great, but I do think it makes sense. When you have these overgrown lots, the ivy's strangling the trees, and then it does move over into the neighboring lot, starts strangling their trees, you get the blackberry, and it is a nuisance. I mean, it is a big nuisance, and it does need to be, and I think they should be just dealt with together.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a tree code related issue, though. I mean, I think if you guys want to talk about the nuisance code, we could come back and talk about that from a policy
Oh,
perspective.
that's different. Well, it says neighbors having complaints about their neighbors' dead trees.
Yeah, but I think the neighbor's dead trees is more like a hazard. And so if you want to go into the space of blackberries and ivy and scotch broom and junk and trash, and I mean, there's a whole lot of things you could go into, but I think we need to have a serious conversation about what it means to resource a code enforcement program to that level. And we can go there, so.
Yeah.
But I think there's a difference from a tree code perspective of somebody actually have a dead tree on their property that could fall on yours versus weeds and trash on their property.
Sometimes it's because the ivy has choked
Oh,
out the
absolutely.
tree. So I think that's what Joe's getting at.
No,
is we just want to make sure that
I'm not
we're-
disagreeing with him. I just wouldn't go there in the tree code. If you want to go there in the nuisance
But
code.
couldn't we maybe go there in terms of your maintenance of your trees or something? Because if you're
I would say on an educational level, yeah, absolutely. But in terms of regulating people to, I mean, let's be clear, you are not resourced.
Correct, but I will say, we do have conditioning authority, and getting at this, replacing the environmental value of a tree that's removed, if somebody gets approval to remove a tree, and we know from our site visit, because we always visit the site for all our type 2 tree removals, that there's ivy there, one of our conditions of approval could be, yeah, you get to remove this tree, you have to plant, and we're going to require you to remove the ivy from
We're
your
going to do that for a
property.
period of time, however, Jessica, it's not into infinity. So if you have a tree on your
That's true.
property and you're not taking care of it, there's nothing in the tree code that requires you. If you want to go there, we can go there as a council, but I think we need to have a discussion about what it means in terms of, I mean, speaking of private property rights, I hear what the mayor's saying. I don't disagree with the impact that he's describing. I'm just saying, I don't think it's the same conversation at all.
Let's put it in the short-term parking lot. Not the long-term, one. Not the one you have to take a bus to.
Okay, I mean,
Just put it in there.
Yeah,
It's just there.
one other thing besides the ivy, but I do agree, I mean, we have to do a shining example as a city first, take all of our stuff and really have a come to ourselves meeting and say we need to take out the ivy in all of our parks and stuff. One thing, and this is arborist related, I would love to have it so that we have the service of an arborist if there's a issue with a tree or whatever that is free to the homeowner. And the reason for that is that we're talking about costs, and I know I know it can be a little tricky, but my worry is that, you know, and I've heard this from a lot of people, they say, well, the city made me come and get an arborist to declare that this tree is whatever, and it cost me $800. And, you know, I mean, these are things that I don't take that lightly, and I'm looking at, we're trying to be more affordable in Lake Oswego, and sometimes we just go, well, yeah, you got to, and then you got to get an attorney to write a letter to do this, and so then you're out $5,000 to do a $3,000 landscaping project.
so I'd really urge us to have a much larger conversation about spending public resources on private property if you're going to want to go there.
Well, okay,
Perhaps
well, then,
there's a grant program or some other way to go about this for folks who have maybe low incomes, but I really don't think you want to be paying for city staff to do assessments on private property. And I have a feeling if I got my city attorney to weigh in, she did agree with me about this one. I hear what you're saying. It's expensive and difficult and cumbersome for
Well,
property
maybe some of
owners.
just creating a more flexible process will help with some of that.
Yeah, again,
burden
it's,
stuff too.
I'm
Right.
It's a
looking at
good point.
costs,
It's a
and
good
every time we
point.
put regulation in, we pass it on to the homeowner. So, I mean, it is our responsibility to a certain extent.
It's a good point. It's a good point. Okay, Counselor Afghan has the shortest thing he's ever said. And
I think we need to have a conversation. I agree with you, but at the same, not tonight,
Yep.
but at
No, you're well
at-
past time.
At the same time, I look at this like we have a tree code that if somebody wants to cut it, they have to go through these conditions because we're trying to have a green city. On the other hand, it's okay to have ivy crawling up the tree and kill the tree. It doesn't make sense to me. So somehow we have to address that. Thank you, Mr.
thanks,
Mayor.
Counselor Afghan. And thank you all very much for the great update and for the work, Counselor Wendland. Thanks for serving on the
it's
committee. You're
complex.
going to do a great job. And it was nice to meet you all. Sochi, thank you. Morgan,
Thank
good
you
to
very
see
much.
Director, okay. Any information from council? Nope.
Yes.
Oh,
Councilor Wedland and I attended the Lake Oswego Tiger Water Partnership. We could not be more prouder than the staff doing their job so excellent that we could not ask them any questions. They had everything we wanted to hear. Thank you.
that's great. Thank you both for serving on that. Okay.
See you in September.
Yes, long recess. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you,
Wow.
everyone. Thank you. All right, time to go. Go to these things. Okay, I gotta get changed. Good job, everyone.